if we're thinking about, if we are going to recruit someone, obviously there's a lot of the time there is a definite requirement, but on occasion, sometimes it's just, if you find a really good person, someone that you really think is going to be a great addition to the team, then, it's hard to be in that position. So sometimes it's worth saying, okay, we will not kind of just continue taking people on and just, actually just find their role a little bit more organically when they're in, but actually capturing that talent is a really important thing, because it's not myself and Ben creating the work, it's all these guys. And so and although there is obviously more experience, less experience cross section of the team, we try not to be too hierarchical, that actually the ideas have to come from the top, and if one of the youngest members of the team comes up with a corker of an idea, then brilliant, it will fly. So that is I think we've always been relatively sort of democratic in that sense, but recruitment is probably the toughest thing, I think, because I suppose we've carved ourselves a position in the sort of the upper band of creative studios, and that means 90% of people are already, you have to kind of disregard when you're looking to take someone on, and then within that 10% you have to find the right person, and that whittles it down to 1%, and before you know it, actually it's really, really difficult to put together the team you want, which is I think probably why we're the size we are, because we're for two reasons. Firstly, we do believe that sort of small is somewhat beautiful, in the fact that the number of people that we are, and we're around 20 people, broken across project management and creative team, weighted more heavily in the creative side. There's only a certain number of people that myself and Ben can really be across and make sure that all the output is what it needs to be, and we know keeping our creative bar up very high. As soon as you start getting 30, 35 people, it's impossible to do that. And so because of that, we feel this is quite a sort of a controlled number of people, but also because actually, there aren't that many really good people out there, so you can't just go and build a team twice as big with the same quality of person. So it's a wrangle. It really is tough.
Yeah, in terms of the way that we work, I think we always try and start the project in the sense that we spoke at the beginning, this sense of bridging vision and obsession together. So we will always try and start a project where we come together, we have an intuitive feel for where that project might take us. Work with the design teams to get to that point, or an individual designer to get to that point, and then it will be sort of assigned almost to a designer within the studio with a guardianship of one of us or both of us, depending on the type of project. It really depends on the type of project, but I think what we really understand now is when we both agree on a solution or a feeling for something, it tends to be right. When one of us doesn't feel that it's, one of us really believes in something, the other one doesn't, tends to not be the right feel or the right solution.
I mean, the reality, the honest reality of it is actually, being very busy means it's actually very difficult for me and Ben to be together, working with the guys together. It's actually, the realisms of a busy studio is the fact that I've got a meeting here, Ben's got a meeting there, and actually we can be like ships in the night, and that's a challenge. But on the occasions where we do get to kind of converge, that's when I think, decisions are made most effectively. The guys get a consistent feedback from us, because obviously Ben can think one thing, I can come along and derail that by saying something completely different, and it's difficult for these guys to kind of mediate our opinions. So one thing we're trying to do much more in the studio, sort of moving forward, is actually, particularly at the start of new projects where it's a new creative challenge, actually make sure that myself and Ben and the guys are really aligned on what our vision is for it, and then hopefully that will lead to a more sort of a smoother kind of journey to the end result. But that's difficult because it's really easy to get wrapped up in the daily routines of being everywhere all the time, and then realise that, God, we've not sat together for 2 days, and that's really wrong,
I think inherent in any project is this sort of careful mix of, and again it sounds a little bit cliche, but of head and heart. and any project needs to have those two blends, and they can come from different perspectives on any one of our projects. So I can have a firm gut feeling and belief, whereas Paul can have a much more from the head and more intelligent response, and it's somehow blending those two, or vice versa, whereas Paul's got a very intuitive feel and I'm trying to add an intellect or a story to it to understand it. It's when those two are carefully balanced, that fulcrum point between the two is kind of where it becomes interesting as a project.
There are moments where the opposite works, and actually, you know, if it's a project that Ben's been sort of working on with the guys for some time and I've not really been part of it, being able to drop in it with fresh eyes and go, well, that's not right. Yeah, it's frustrating for them, but actually sometimes that clarity of just a new pair of eyes and ears on it, you can very quickly see what's either missing or it should maybe twist to and things like that. So, but there's no, in an ideal world, we'd all be sat together and it'd all be very utopian. But
if there was a secret formula for reducing good work, God, I'd have written the book a long time ago, and I'd have had a lot less sleepless nights. So I don't know quite what it is, but it's a whole series of inputs that all vary all the time. But ultimately, when you can feel it here and there's a passion for that idea, and you know that you can see that through and craft it through, then I mean that's all you can really work with. You've got to grab onto something and see it through, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, critique is such a difficult thing to give because it's bound with that idea of head and heart. Sometimes it's just a gut feeling, and then you need to intellectualize it, or you're intellectualizing it and trying to give a story to it to articulate it. And somewhere between those two is where the real critique will sit.
I think the only experience we've had is, obviously, remember, we've got quite limited agency experience. We've only ever both worked at North Design, which was a great period. And then there, it was very much an informal process where you'd be constantly reminded by some of the more senior figures that that's not good enough, and then you try and push it to make sure they didn't say that. And that was it was a little bit kind of, it was more of a sort of camaraderie approach where you're all in it together, so everyone's responsible for it being good. So if one of the older guys might say to you, Paul, that should be better than that. What's that? You go, oh, okay, right. And that was it. It was never any kind of formal kind of critique there. So that's kind of, we've never known that kind of, I would say, more structured presentation.
But I do think there are two things that allow good work to happen. One is a level, a dash of competition. And that doesn't mean everyone's pitching up with ideas on the wall. We don't work like that. We don't believe that's a good way of working. But a sense of achievement and pushing things individually, and then other designers thinking, God, I wish I could have done that. I think that's it's a healthy in measure. And the other part is ownership. In order to ensure that a design has ownership of a project, means that they will commit more of themselves into that project. And therefore the outcome is always much better because of that. So again, it's just trying to keep those two ideas, or two component parts in check.